The minute you are ashamed of a child because of the shame they bring to you, it says that your ego is more important than your child's happiness. That's all it says.
KP, I'm so curious because if I can speak for myself, I'm a rojak mix of cultures, right? So I find it very hard to identify with one specific culture. You have moved so much in your life. You were in Hong Kong, you were in Thailand, China for a little bit, and then you were moving to the US, and then you came to Singapore. You've been in Singapore for a long time. Do you have issues figuring out what your identity is? How do you see yourself?
I would say I don't have issues about my identity now because I now identify after having been here for several decades as a Singaporean. When I came back here, I was called a lot of names like Chakantan and so on.
That was during your NS days?
During my NS days. My accent still has some Americanisms to it, but I'm an outsider. Even in Singapore, my children have so many friends from their childhood days. My wife has tons of friends from her school days. I don't have very many friends in Singapore.
That's tough.
But I don't see myself as a parochial Singaporean. I am the sum total of everything I've been, which is a mishmash of different cultures. And I think I've come to embrace the fact that coming from a very diverse background may well make a young person feel in some ways insecure, but in some other ways, I think it's worked to my benefit. And part of the modest success of Banyan Tree is the fact that I was always an outsider to everything, which made me, therefore, able to embrace other cultures more easily.
Oh, that's interesting.
I was quite comfortable being in a very strange place like Mexico or Cuba or China or Japan because I didn't feel I was very Singaporean. And when I talk to Singaporeans trying to go overseas, I always tell them that they must shed their Singaporeanness because the not so good side about being Singaporean is everything is measured by Singapore standards, which makes you in some ways quite parochial. So there's a tendency to look at other cultures and compare them to Singapore and be uncomfortable with their cultures and working environments if they are not similar to how things are done in Singapore. Just like so many Americans think that the rest of the world should function like America. Singaporeans do have that same view when they go particularly to ASEAN countries, when they go to poorer countries, so-called poorer countries. They see them as dirtier, inefficient, corrupt, and they don't see the beauty of the cultures.
So you've spoken about how the mix of identities have helped you, even in business, when you go to different cultures. Has it been difficult for you in other ways when it comes to business?
So in my own particular case, the weakness is that I don't have a lot of friends, I don't have a lot of contacts. I can't do a lot of guanxi, and I don't mean corruption, just even guanxi in terms of doing business. People know everybody else. Just to talk to for advice or leads and so on. I can't do that in Thailand because although I'm very culturally familiar with it, I never grew up there. But I've never believed that if you are in a situation where you think you are disadvantaged, you should never look at that. You should just look at your situation and say, I am in this unique situation. What can I do about it to turn it to my advantage? That attitude, I think, is critical in business. It's critical for young people and for anyone trying to have a happy life.
Yeah. Beyond business, does that also affect you think, socially?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah?
My best friends are my family.
Yeah?
There's only two persons from my Stanford years I'm still in touch with. There's virtually nobody from my high school and secondary school years in Thailand. I wouldn't say I'm solitary, but I don't have friends I do things with. So they're either colleague friends or they're family.
Yeah.
And it's been quite nice because my kids are like friends.
Yeah. Speaking of your family, your kids, now you're a grandfather too. So
five.
A grandfather of five? You've got
Absolutely.
five now. Wow.
I've got five.
Well,
yeah, what do you think?
Congratulations.
Five. Not that it's my achievement, but it's five.
Yeah, so a grandfather, a parent for a very long time before that. So, I recall something that you said about your parents in another chat that you had. It was very striking to me because you said that whatever happened in your life, whatever you did, however your parents felt, they never made you feel like you were shameful to them. Have you ever at any point in your life been afraid of what your kids or grandkids would do?
No, never.
No?
I mean, I could be. We're a very close family. We talk a lot. And we talk so much that I remember when our kids were teenagers and school kids and they brought their school friends home for dinners, they would say they think we're having a fight because everybody would be talking at the same time at the table. I think what I learned from my parents, my father in particular, because he was a very established diplomat, he knew the first generation leaders from Lee Kuan Yew to Goh Keng Swee to Rajaratnam. So his face is very important to him. But when I was detained and so on, never once did they show any shame because they felt that what I did was for what I believed in. Now, if I had gotten arrested for theft or for fraud or things which they would feel is ethically absolutely unacceptable, I think they would be feeling quite ashamed.
Right.
And I made the same point to my children as long as they were growing up, that if you were to do something that anyone, including myself, would think is morally and ethically wrong, I would be ashamed because it would mean that I didn't bring you up properly. But if you did things that got you into trouble with society, but which you and I feel are honest expressions of your values and belief, why should I feel shame? To me, they're far more everlasting values we've tried to inculcate into our children. And if you kept those values and society looks down on it, why should we be ashamed?
You know, I'm betting there will be parents who will watch this video. I assume they can understand what you're saying logically, but I think it's a long-standing thing where some people just cannot let go of that sense of faith. So what would you say to parents who are watching saying, how can I not feel that?
I think it's really simple. The minute you are ashamed of a child because of the shame they bring to you, it says that your ego is more important than your child's happiness. That's all it says. My father is very conservative. My brother is gay. My brother came out and my parents completely loved him for it, right? So if you're ashamed of your child, it should never be because of face. You should be ashamed of your child because your child has done something that truly you find unacceptable.
You know, KP, if anyone's watching and you Google your name, KP, and you Google meritocracy, that's been the past 5, 6, 7 conversations that people have been having with you. So
I don't know why, but...
You are the leading expert right now in Singapore on the issue of meritocracy.
No, I'm just a leading dissident on why I think meritocracy is very important, but that there are aspects about it that's problematic.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. If I can boil it down to one aspect of it is that there is, you know, like a self-recurring group of people that, you know, they just keep coalescing in the same groups, right? And it becomes this group of elites, as you put it. Do you consider yourself part of that group in Singapore?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, it would be a height of hypocrisy to say that I didn't come from a privileged background. I've said this when people ask me about our sort of moderate business success, and I've always asked them, you want the bullshit PR story or you want the truth, right? The bullshit PR stories, I knew all along we were going to have a success. I knew all along what I wanted to do in life. You want the real story, is half of it is luck. I'm old enough and envious enough to have seen people who are definitely more capable, harder working than me, and they didn't get anywhere near to what I have done.
Wow.
At the same time, I've seen people I don't truly respect at all, and they are way up there 10 times higher than me, right?
So could you give me a list of those names?
Yeah. Which ones? The ones that are not so good or the ones that are better?
Not so good, yeah.
No, the point is,
yeah.
you just have to accept the fact that a lot of what we are in life is due to luck, bad luck, as well as good luck.
Yeah.
And therefore, you just have to accept that and take advantage of good luck when it comes, and to try to not be sort of completely defeated by bad luck when that comes.
Can I go back to when you first were drawing up plans to start Banyan and have it move forward? Was this something you and Claire came up with together at the start?
Well, yeah, because Claire would tell you, obviously, she has never forgiven me for being a businessman. She vowed never to marry a businessman.
Yeah.
I vowed never to be a businessman. We both hated businessmen. And there I am, you know. I was a journalist writing about economics and so on. Claire did sociology, but she did development sociology, I did development economics. So we both had an interest in development of the so-called third world in those days. And so when we got into business, it was totally by accident.
Oh, yeah?
I got into business even before Banyan Tree because my father had a stroke.
Right.
And being the eldest son, I ditched everything in Hong Kong, and I was actually accepted to be a fellow at the then new Euro-Asia Center in INSEAD to write about economic development in Southeast Asia.
And you had to give that up.
I give that up to go back to my father's business. I'd never done an MBA and all that kind of stuff. And the main point is that when we started Banyan Tree, it was never about the idea of making money, but it was always a vehicle for the expression of things that we wanted to do in life, and still remains so.
So what did you want to do in life back then?
Because back in the 70s, Southeast Asia was not what it was today, and even Singapore was not what it is today. It was still relatively poor. Only in the last 20 or so years has the whole of Asia come into its own. We wanted to be involved in socio-economic development of Asia, and Banyan Tree was a way for doing that. I guess what made it really real for us was the fact that we had the power to do good or to do bad. I realized that tourism was truly a double-edged sword. And I saw it physically, how developers would build hotels and completely denude the land, cut down all the trees, all the soil will wash into the sea and kill corals and so on and so forth. You flatten a piece of land because it's easier to build on, over tourism, and so many things are happening with tourism, which is a very negative effect. You would have in our days, 1 day's room rate would be equal to someone's 1 monthly salary.
Wow.
So you have the social contradiction of these big fat Germans coming to a suntan and then these pretty little Thai girls serving them. So a lot of opportunity for societal conflict.
Yep.
But then we also saw that in many places around the world, there's no other means of development other than tourism. So the challenge to us was, how can you combine these two so you can actually mitigate the negative effects and at the same time put people together? So the whole idea of Banyan Tree Gallery, which is very successful now, was started by Claire because she worked with local villagers to create crafts that we could sell in our hotels. We commissioned cushions from villagers and textiles and so on to use in our hotels. That's on the social side. We have had for 30 years a free kindergarten in Laguna Phuket that has probably turned out thousands and thousands of graduates, kindergarten kids, many of whom now actually come back and work for us.
So almost like a sociological carbon footprint, right? Like you sort of balance that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always said that you cannot just look at mitigating carbon offsets. What about people's livelihoods?
Yeah.
You have a lot of responsibility for that too. We have a program called Seedlings, where we take young people at risk, whether they're orphans or they're kind of like misdemeanors, misbehaving people, and they get into trouble with the law and so on. And we train them at restaurants in which we own and give them a certification of skills so they can get a good job.
Yeah. So a few years ago, actually, I saw that Banyan was doing something very interesting where the guests had an option to do some sort of volunteer work or go into communities for something, be it a visitation or something like that, which I thought was very fascinating. What do you think is the impact of doing something like that for a tourist?
Well, we've been doing that for a long time. And now the world has caught up, and now they've given it a name. And they call it experiential tourism. In Thailand, we were the first to build Banyan Tree Resort, which was using Thai architecture. And our spas were another thing altogether. That's another whole story, where spa consultants quit on me because I said we would not wear clunky shoes. The therapist should be barefoot in the spa because you take off your shoes wherever you go in Asia, right?
Yeah.
And the spa consultants we originally hired said, "Oh, Mr. Huai, we have to disengage from you because you would ruin our reputation."
Where are they from, these consultants?
They're from the UK,
Wow.
where you wear your shoes to your bedroom, right? I mean, but the point is, we've done these things simply because we believed in it, right? So our perspective when we entered into this business, the industry was a vehicle.
If you are trying to lead a team and you're trying to pull people into your team to do something, how do you not just look at what we are used to looking at? For instance, grades.
Grades. I think anybody would tell you who's actually been a seasoned employer like I am that grades matter very little.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. You know, I got thrown out of universities and so on. So if I said grades matter, then I wouldn't rate myself very high. Grades only matter to the extent that they are a measure of how much work you're capable of doing. Being head of a university for 25 years and yet very proud of SMU, I'm enough of a cynic to know that you can also game the system if you're halfway smart enough. And at the same time, I've always also believed that who we are in life, only a small percentage of it is due to our education. a much, much bigger portion probably, I think, is due to the home environment. How your parents taught you values. And I think secondary schools probably matter quite a lot more than universities. The character building and so on. You will find one interesting statistic. 70% of the CEOs in the Fortune 1000 companies in America, they all didn't go to the Ivy League universities.
Oh, wow.
But they all took part in university sports, team sports. The ones who go to Ivy League universities usually go to relatively singular professions, meaning professions where you don't need to build a team so much. They become lawyers, they become management consultants, where they build up their own individual achievements.
Yeah.
They don't become CEOs. And many of these people go to state universities because they're more like normal people. They learn what it's like to be with other normal people so they can empathize when they lead. And team sports is important because you learn at a very early age about competition, you learn about disappointment, you learn so many things. So to me, learning is not only from a formal educational institution. You learn through so many other things.
Yeah. I mean, you co-founded SMU, you were on the board for many, many years, decades even. I remember you, in a separate conversation, you were talking about how you were not very pleased with what you saw young Singaporeans doing, young graduates doing when they went out to other countries and they were behaving a certain way with a certain mindset. What did you hope to achieve with SMU?
To do the opposite. Because I hadn't gone to Singapore for education, right? So, but intuitively, when I came back and I started getting all these comments about how Singaporeans are very nerdy, they score very well in exams, but they're not very articulate, they can't really think for themselves, they don't know how to solve problems. I felt a bit of a resentment, not that I came from the educational system, but I felt that this is really the product of a particular educational process. So I had become so critical of the system that the government said, in its typical way of co-opting people, you think you're so smart, you think you can criticize the system, here, you go and start a university. So when I was asked to start SMU, my main purpose was to be able to show to myself and to show to the world that if we had a different educational system, approach to education, then we could turn out Singaporeans who would be just as articulate, just as capable of solving real life problems and so on and so forth as all the kids who went overseas. The classes in SMU are all like graduate school. They're all in a tiered theater with 45 kids to a teacher, which is very rare. A class is about 3 hours so that you can't possibly have a professor talking. A lot of the time are students talking to each other.
Yeah, there's quite a heavy weightage on class participation that people talk.
And you have name tags so you actually see the other students. And so with that kind of emphasis, you know, the students did come out much more articulate, self-confident, and so on. And of course, this has now spread to the other universities. So the point of difference between SMU and the other universities is a lot less now. But as I always have said to SMU, even to the last day before I retired, is because I see that happening everywhere, including in my own company, and that is hubris is the biggest cause of failure. And you can become so successful, you start getting so cocky, self-confident, that it will be your downfall. And I keep on telling SMU students, faculty, and others, we think so highly of ourselves, you better not, because that's the beginning of the downfall if we think we're so different and so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not from SMU?
I was from SMU.
Oh, I can see the brilliance then. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I dropped out after 1 year.
Why did you do that?
Why?
Yeah.
Now, for me, it was an understanding of what I wanted to do in my path, and I was very clear what I wanted to do.
What did you do? What did you do?
So I just stopped going to school and I started doing my own thing. I went to radio and now I'm doing this. And, yeah.
I mean, obviously, anybody who drops out because they know what else they want to do, I would say more power to you. I mean, if you dropped out because you failed every course, now that's a different thing. But you know, I went to Donghai University, I didn't finish. I went to Stanford, I got kicked out. I went to NUS. And I've always believed that education can help you. But if you know what you want to do and you know that it's a limit to what education can do for you, then what's a big deal?
And you're in your 70s this year. You know, you've gone through many learning experiences, I assume. Yeah. So now as you reach this point in your life, are there any new feelings and thoughts that have been coming up for you recently?
Oh, yeah. Mortality. I find it quite interesting when I talk to people that there's still this last taboo.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, totally sensible things like if I had incurable cancer, would I want to have euthanasia? Would I want to choose the time when to die? I mean, totally practical, right?
Yeah.
People won't talk about it. Death is the last taboo. You do not talk about death. And even for my own kids, when I talk to them about, when I'm going to die, you're very healthy, you're fine, you're okay.
Yeah.
But you are 72, how much longer can you go on?
Yeah.
So the issue that, I wouldn't say death, that makes it sound more morbid. I would say mortality is definitely something in my mind and Claire's minds much more than before. And it's a good thing, because when you know that you are mortal and therefore one day it's not going to be that far away, even if I get to live to 92, that's only 20 years from now. For you, 20 years is like an eternity, right? You can't even imagine what life is going to be like 20 years from now.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, unless something really terrible happens to me, I've got 10 good years left, right? Because after 82, you don't know whether your health will really rapidly decline or not. The positive side of it, it makes you feel you've got to live every day with a lot more purpose, with gratitude for whatever you have, for whatever is going to come. And it may not be, again, purpose with a capital P. You could be a normal retiree at 72 and saying, I've got limited time left. Maybe I should really spend it more helping other people, or spending more time with my grandchildren whom I've neglected, blah, 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 or whatever. It gives you the time to reflect on the past in order to make best use of whatever time is left. And the worst sin for a young person is to sleepwalk through life, not knowing what you want to do, wake up in the morning a bit bored, not wanting to go to work, not sure whether this boyfriend you really want or don't want, but a bit too tired to get rid of the boyfriend, and this and that. Just kind of like avoiding difficult issues. And I've said it's the worst sin you can have, because I'd much rather that you go out and do crazy things and you regret, and at least you've done it, you know you've lived, rather than just pursue a nice career, get married because your parents think you should get married and you think that, well, this guy seems okay. And then before you know it, you're going to be 72. And then you'll say to yourself, what did I do with my life? Did I really have genuine happiness? Did I really live life to the fullest? So I think this is a good period of my life, except for some health issues and so on, because I've developed a perspective on life that can guide me into the life I have left, and also allows me to give advice to younger people about how you should live your life with purpose.
Yeah. So may I ask you now, as a younger person now?
You want to dump your boyfriend or what?
No, not that one. But I'll ask you a different question. I'm so glad, I'm so happy to hear that you have this, these feelings about mortality and moving forward in this phase in your life. But I don't think those feelings come immediately. I feel that obviously came after time to process that you are getting older.
Of course.
What was that transition like for you? Did you struggle against it? Did you wake up one day and realize, hey, I'm older?
It's little things, health-wise. And I blame it, my wife blames it on the fact that I didn't wear red underwear during my my dragon year. Right? You're supposed to, in your cycle year, you're supposed to wear red. So this is my 6th cycle. And I said, this is crazy superstition. In fact, my kids gave me a pair of bright red Calvin Klein underwear for my birthday, but unfortunately the size didn't fit. So, but this year I've had some not major health issues. I tore a tendon on my shoulder, I had to get it fixed. I had a heart ablation, which was supposedly partly due to COVID. You're less physically vigorous as you were, and you try to exercise simply to prevent muscle loss, for example, not to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think even the process of aging, you go through the same 4 stages that people say you go through if you have an incurable disease, right? Denial, anger, bargaining, and then
grief,
acceptance.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, when you discover that you've got incurable cancer, it all happens in one go and it's really intense. When you don't have any sudden incurable disease, it's just aging, you have a much smaller version of that whole process and much longer. But then you also realize that you're probably wiser in many ways, more than you ever were. I find that the advice I give to my colleagues and to younger people, they truly value. Then the acceptance of it is not begrudging type of acceptance.
Yeah.
It's an acceptance of life and death, an acceptance that this is what you and everybody else in this world is going to go through. And the people who accept that with grace are really lovely people to be around.
That's wonderful. May I say, or may I make an observation?
Yeah.
So I feel that for yourself and for other, let's call them leaders like yourself, who are always invited to do commencement speeches and panel discussions and stuff like that, I realize that you, in particular, bring up a lot of quotes of other people when you answer questions. May I ask, out of everything you've done, what do you hope people will quote you for in the future?
I've always said that asking why is the source of all leadership. It's something that you are born with. One day when you have a kid, you're going to realize it's very hard for you to be kind to your kid when they're asking why. Because one day you just tell them, shut up and don't ask so many questions. Because kids ask the most questions. In their innocence, they ask why all the time. And then as we get older, we don't ask why anymore. I think the spirit of curiosity, the spirit of critical enquiry, it's a source of human progress, and it's a source of our own happiness too, that we question the things around us, we question ourselves, we question everything. And from there, having the wisdom that with a lot of questioning, you don't just become cynical, but that you actually may never find the answers, but you're glad you asked. So, yeah.
That's a very long quote, but I'll stop memorizing it.
Sorry about that. No, it would just be, he said, always ask why.
That's
okay,
it.
That's
the
it.
quote.
That's it.